Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Franchise Show. I hope you're all doing well. This is the show, and I'm going to do it where we get under the hat of all things franchising. And it's a live show. Well, it's live if it's July the 15th at around 5:15 for about 45 minutes in the UK or 12:15 in bits of America and all sorts of other times around the world, to be honest. But so it's a live show. And if you are here live, we love to hear from you because this show is for you. It's for our community. And you are the producers and the directors of this show. So the conversation goes the way you want it to go. I always say that at the beginning, I start off with this much written down. But by the end, I've got a huge amount of notes written down. And that's because this is a conversation, not just between the two of us here on the screen, but a conversation between us all. So, as I say, if you are here live, pop in a comment, say hello, and get involved in today's conversation. And today's topic is franchise brain drain. Now, we're going to find out what that is all about when we talk to our lovely guest. And we have a fantastic guest with us today. It's the lovely Jan Timms. Jan, welcome to the Franchise Show.
Thank you, Harvey.
Excellent. Well, it's great to have you with us. Before we get into today's topic, perhaps you could just do a little introduction to yourself and kind of how you've got into the wonderful world of franchising.
Okay. Well, I'm the author of the book, The Ultimate Franchising Success Formula. I'm founder of Get Smart Services and the Get Smart Learning Academy. And you know how some franchise groups tend to get stuck at a certain point? They hit the ground running and then they kind of plateau. I suppose that's where I come in because I help them implement systems to recruit, develop, and replicate successful franchisees, systems to grow the number of successful franchisees and eliminate the resource drain from the struggling low performers. So that's what I do. I started out in franchising about 25 years ago when I joined an Australian franchise group called they were actually an instant print franchise. Snap printing was what they're called. And I very quickly discovered that franchising is incredibly challenging. It's not like the corporate world that I came from. You can't just tell franchisees what to do and expect them to do it. So, but the fact is that if we can't get franchisee buy-in and action from the programs and initiatives that we implement, then it's going to slow us down. It's going to hold back success. So it's really very, very challenging. And the number one critical success factor in franchising, I believe, is the franchisor's ability to recruit, develop, and replicate successful franchisee partners. That's what franchising is all about. That's what drives our economic engine. And that really should be the litmus test for all strategy and decision making. And I ended up so passionate about this that I actually did a PhD research study, started that back in 2013, into franchising success factors and why franchise groups hit that plateau, and how do the successful groups actually get out of that, and that became highly recognized in academic circles. It was cited in many academic journals and published papers, and I was actually invited to present various stages of the findings at the International Society of Franchising on 3 consecutive years, which was really cool because they were in exciting places. So I decided that it was just too valuable to leave gathering dust in academia land. So I decided I'd better do something about it. And that's why I wrote the book and then developed the e-learning and coaching programs and everything else. So that's how I got into franchising. And yeah, I mean, I think what came out of the research was such a powerful formula for success. And it was a formula that I wish I had when I set out 25 years ago. And it's great that at the end of your career, you suddenly get all the information that would have really helped at the beginning. So I guess my mission is to try and get that out there. And yeah, so we were talking about the franchise brain drain, and
I think I'm just going to stop you there for a moment, because first of all, look, fantastic introduction. Really love that. Love how you've got into franchising. You know how you, because franchising is challenging. It is a real challenge, but it's a fantastic challenge. And there's some, like you say, some amazing resources. You know, I love how it developed from a PhD piece of writing, into a book, into a course. And now I really like that ethos of trying to give to new franchisors and franchisees the information you wish you'd had at that beginning. I love it. So before we get into what franchise brain drain is, I'd like to recognize a few people who have joined us here live already. So let's say hello to a few people. We have the lovely Simon Wise, expert franchise recruiter here in the UK. So if you need any franchise staff, then please reach out to Simon. And he's put hello franchise friends. Well, hello to you too, Simon. We have the lovely Julie Waits. Julie is a fantastic resource expert and passionate advocate for franchising here in the UK. And runs something called First Fridays, which you must check out, which is a fantastic event highlighting all sorts of different things in the world of franchising. So do check that out on, as you can imagine, the first Friday of each month. And she's put, good evening, Harvey et al. From the wet northeast of England. Well, yes, it's not too bad here, but it can be a bit that way up north sometimes. We have a LinkedIn user here. I think that's Johnny Joseph, because I recognize Los Angeles. He's put good day. Oh, good day. There you go. Had to come in from a cool-ish Los Angeles. Had to go to Cabo in Mexico for some warm weather tomorrow. Fantastic. Well, Johnny is a franchise auditor. So it's going to be great to hear your thoughts on, the franchise life cycle and its ups and downs. And when we start to get into what franchise brain drain is, we'll see which way it starts to go. We got two more people before we get into that. We have the lovely Lisa Feverick with us, a regular now to the show, and Lisa helps guide women that are going through the menopause, and she offers a fantastic service there. Always fantastic to have you with us. And she's put, hi everyone. Well, hi to you too, Lisa. Great to have you. Look, we have a legend in our midst. We've got the wonderful Joe Caruso. And Joe's put, hello everyone from Havre de Grace. Almost my name there. Maryland, USA. Well, it's fantastic to have you with us, Joe. And Joe is going to be our guest next week, and we'll get into what we're going to be talking about at the end of today's session. Let's have a look. Here we have AJ Rama. Hello, everyone. I'm AJ from the National Franchise Show in the US. Great seeing everyone. Well, it's fantastic to have you with us. And I'm certainly aware of the National Franchise Show. So great to have you with us, AJ. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Keep your comments coming in, and we will keep recognizing you because it's all about you. Right, let's get back into this. So, Jan, let's now get into what franchise brain drain is, because it sounds terrifying. What happens when your brain starts to drain?
Well, I guess I'm not really referring to a brain actually draining, but it's what happens when either long-serving franchisees leave the system, or support team members resign or move on, members of the franchisor team, and they take they often take all of their knowledge, the valuable know-how that they've built up goes with them. and so that's lost. And so that's what I refer to as the brain drain.
I think it's really interesting, and I don't know if Penny is with us yet, but one of our lovely supporters, Penny Hopkinson, I'm going to put up a QR code now because she's a good supporter of the show, and a fellow author as well, actually. But
Yes.
she's an author of an ops manual book, but that's not what it's about. It's about knowledge sharing and creating a knowledge sharing platform. So I think this would really resonate with Penny. And you're absolutely right. If you have, let's take a member of staff that's been with the company for 10 years, if everything good about that is stuck in their brain and they go, you've lost it all, haven't you? So you're absolutely right. And you've got to protect that. The same with franchisees, a long-serving franchisee, you've got to embrace them as part of your culture, and hopefully then that's passed down and not lost, isn't it? Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. So look, how do we go about then identifying sort of areas where we might end up losing some valuable knowledge? At what points in the process can that happen? And let's talk about that from the perspective of, say, the franchisee and then the franchisor.
Yeah, I mean, what tends to happen when a franchise group starts out, emerging franchise groups, the knowledge is all in the brain of the founder, and as they grow and develop, you find that the franchisees that they bring on board are also creating knowledge. And then if there aren't right from the start systems in place to make sure that knowledge is continuously captured and brought to a central point where it can be shared, then a lot of that actually can get lost, and you're in danger of it getting lost. And to me, franchising know-how, it's not just important, it's actually the product, it's what you're selling through business format franchising. It's that proven transferable formula for success. But it's not enough to just have an ops manual and job done. There's so many franchise groups that I've worked with where, we've got an ops manual, and you start talking to franchisees and nobody ever refers to it. It's just gathering. It's just ticked a box because it's something that they had to do. And Penny is absolutely marvelous. I've got her book. I've spoken to Penny, and she's absolutely right about it's far more than just creating the ops manual. You've got to create a living, breathing knowledge bank that becomes the go-to place for everybody that wants to know anything within the system.
I think it's really fascinating. I mean, when you started there, let's put ourselves in the mind of a founder that's thinking about franchising their business. You absolutely nailed it there. Everything is in their brain, right? Everything that is going to be this system moving forward is in their brain. And it's about how you can, let's take this perspective of this new business that's going to become a franchise business. It's about how you can extract it and, like you say, put it into these systems that filter, capture, and funnel that information in the right way. And it's really hard how we often talk here about transferring values into culture. And I think there's a bit of that there, isn't there? Because when you've got this idea and it's been in your head sometimes for years, sometimes people don't get around to actually producing their idea for a long, long time. So there's so much stuff that's in there. Not all of it is valuable. Some of it should stay up there, and it's trying to get the right stuff out when you create your system, isn't it? It's not just about that drain, that loss. It's about, first of all, what should be lost, what shouldn't be in there in the first place. Yeah.
I mean, that's another big issue that I come across with franchise groups, is that their operations manual is just so out of date. It's become irrelevant. because it's not living, breathing, and dynamic. So they wrote the manual, and nobody does it like that anymore. That's just so outdated. We've invented our own way of doing things because the franchisor doesn't really know what it's like at the coalface, and you get this disconnect if you're not careful. So it's really about and I'm all about systems, as you probably know. So it's about making sure that you have systems in place to gather the knowledge. I mean, I have a system that I use with my franchisor clients that I call Grasp, and it's like, you've got to be gathering that tacit knowledge that exists out within your network, not just within your network, within your suppliers, within your customers, that are sort of basically all around you, and gathering that. But then you've got to refine it. So we need to refine it so that it makes sense and that people can make sense of it. And then we add it or align it with the knowledge that we already have.
Yeah.
And then it needs to be shared, and then it needs to be protected. And so those core elements of the system what are needed really for, a robust knowledge management, I suppose, is what it comes down to.
Absolutely. I can't believe you kept saying the word gather as well. Our sponsor there is going to be absolutely delighted by that one. I don't think Neil can be with us today, but Neil has a platform that allows you to gather that information from your franchisees. So it was just perfect. That one happened to be up while you were talking.
And that's so critical. I mean, with the technology we have today, it's so much easier than it used to be. Yeah. And yet too many franchise groups are still not doing it.
No.
And one of the things I think that holds franchisors back is, if I can say it, they think they know it all. It's not accepting that there's a lot of knowledge out there that they may be unaware of or don't know, and so that's something that can become one of those silent killers, I guess, that that holds back success.
I think that's really interesting you said there, because as a founder, when we're talking again about an entrepreneur that wants to start a franchise business, you've got to be able to let go a little bit as well, haven't you? Accept the fact that because you are giving away your entire business model, albeit for a charge, but that's the basis of franchising. You're doing that work for someone to buy that work that you've done, and people get protective over it. And like you say, they think they know it all, but actually if they become accepting to the fact that they have got a powerful knowledge sharing base, and if they do what you said, they gather it, they share it, they protect it, they funnel it in the right way, then it can be incredibly powerful. We've got another couple of comments and hellos to do, so let's do that. We have now, it doesn't say who it is, but I think it's Lewis from the Netherlands. Great to see you. Always great to see you. A regular on the show. Put hi, Harvey Tuck from the Netherlands. Well, hi to you too. Great to have you with us. We have the lovely Nadine with us. Great to have you with us, Nadine. Nadine's put hi, everyone. Well, hi to you too. Great to hear your thoughts on what we're talking about at the moment, which is we're talking about a founder. We're talking about when you're creating your franchise business and how you're capturing that information, how you're sharing it, what you're doing with that. And more importantly, we're talking about how not to lose that, how it doesn't get diluted. And you start having franchisees that aren't following that true heart of the business. And there's some real logical steps that you can take to make sure that doesn't happen. So it's been a great conversation so far. Let's have a look at this. We've got one here that's come in from Joe. And Joe's put, Harvey, it is more accurate that within most founders' brains that they have not thought through standards and SOPs, and sometimes they never get to them. Yeah, what do you make of this one, Jan?
I've seen it. Yes, I can't disagree, Joe. And it just happens, and they get away with the first 3 or 4 franchisees, because they've got the time to teach them and share their own knowledge, share their own tacit knowledge. But then as they grow, that becomes unsustainable. And so you haven't got you haven't got a system for replication, which is what we need to have in franchising. So it loops back around to this whole process of, you've got to have that dynamic, living, breathing knowledge bank, and you've got to teach new franchisees to use it, not to rely on asking their field support person every time they don't know what to do, and then they get the answer. That forms a habit. So we actually need to embed knowledge management, I guess, into the culture and the way that we do things as well. So, and they're just absolutely critical components for success in franchising.
I completely agree. I there's so many things that you're saying that I think are so relevant, but it's really interesting to think of knowledge management as a thing, right? Because we're talking about, we were talking about that founder and them being a bit protective of their idea and giving that away. But let's now take a franchisee. Let's go back to something we said earlier on, where we were talking about a long-standing franchisee that leaves the business. Okay? Now, when you're a long-standing franchisee, a bit like when you're a long-standing employee, I guess in a way you might feel a little protected. You've got a little bit of, perhaps you feel like you've got a little bit of power, a little bit of edge, a little bit of, because you've been there and you've got that knowledge. And, they say knowledge is power. But like you say, there's got to be a dynamic shift here, where yes, knowledge is still power, but it's shared knowledge that's power.
Yes. Yeah. And I'd say knowledge isn't power. It's actually what you do with that knowledge. It's how you put it into action, how you implement it is the true source of power. And so that knowledge being shared, and having a culture where people share their knowledge willingly makes it very easy. But again, if we haven't got the culture right, then you get resistance to sharing.
You do.
And why? And we talked about the life cycle of franchisees. I don't know whether you're familiar with Greg Nathan's franchisee factors, where
I know. Yeah, I do know him. Yeah,
franchisees go through those life cycle phases of, it's glee in the beginning because they're really happy, and then it moves through to fee, and then me. It's all about me, or the reason I'm successful is because of me. It's not because of the franchisor at all. So why should I be paying fees? And if you don't actually manage that life cycle and really get them to we, because in actual fact, what works in franchising is the interdependent relationship that you have between a franchisee and a franchisor, and that balance of power tension is again really, really critical. So actually managing, being aware of where your franchisees are in the life cycle, and then having strategies in place to manage the various phases is something that is really quite important as well.
I think there's some really interesting things that you've touched upon there, because I'm just trying to think, as a franchisee goes through that life cycle, particularly when they start coming into that me part of it, if they got there, which they shouldn't. But I think it's really interesting to give them a little bit more power, right? So a franchisee, becomes a multi-site franchisee, becomes, somebody that knows as much about the system as perhaps the franchisor in the end, and they're an advocate. Well, they're really very powerful for the business, and they are an advocate for the business, and if you get them involved in working groups, and maybe if you get them involved in helping onboard other franchisees, maybe there's some financial stuff involved in that, but maybe it's just creating that culture and that, of sharing that knowledge, and that new franchisee is going, wow, thank you so much for sharing that with me. And that kind of feels good, doesn't it, to sort of pass that on then?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the methods, there's many methods that I share in the book about how you can gather knowledge. But one of the things that works really well is to have a mentoring system in place with your established successful franchisees, mentoring new franchisees as they come into the system. And at a couple of franchise groups that I worked for before I kind of got on my own, I actually introduced a mentoring system, and we paid the experienced franchisee. We actually paid them a fee. I think it was about $1,000 Australian, but to go through a structured mentoring program that involved, some days at the beginning, and then basically a monthly meeting where they, where they could basically share ideas and share knowledge. And that worked really well, because it meant that new franchisees they're kind of welcomed into the system, and they become part of it a lot easier. So, yeah, it's something I always recommend.
I love that. I really love that. I mean, I was listening to somebody from McDonald's talking fairly recently. Now, their systems of mentoring are incredibly complex because of the nature of their business and how vast it is. But they still have a system of mentoring. And it's a very powerful way to manage the life cycle of a franchisee and the life cycle of the franchise as well. They're very franchise systems should be solid, but they're also malleable. They're adaptable. They should change with the times, with what your network is doing. They've got to have some cores to them, some pillars that they flex around. I did something the other week. What are your non-negotiables, right? And there's a few of those within it. With perhaps they're your values that have turned into your culture. But I think you're right. It's got to be able to shift and change. If you've got a franchise network, for instance, that's based on regions, and there are certain businesses where all the regions are sold, right? And therefore you're not so much recruiting, unless you've got a high churn rate, but you're not really recruiting new franchisees. You are just managing this evolving collection of franchisees. Some of them at the beginning, some of them have been there years, and yeah, it's a really delicate balancing act, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, if you have just joined us today, this is the Franchise Show, and today we are talking franchise brain drain, franchise knowledge sharing, franchise life cycles. We're going down all sorts of different roads. It's been a fantastic conversation so far. It's fantastic to have our lovely guest with us talking about this. So look, let's talk about things from the perspective of perhaps a franchisee now, and how they themselves, because I think we've looked at this from the perspective of a franchisor looking at their franchisee, right, and they're seeing them go through these life cycle changes, which is relatively consistent throughout franchising, that they have these life cycles, even in different sectors. But if you're a franchisee, how do you sort of prepare yourself to go through these life cycles? Is it, again, just adapting that culture?
Yeah, look, I'm a big advocate for actually right from the get-go with new franchisees explaining the life cycle stages they're likely to go through, because that makes it so much easier for the field support manager to be able to say, when the franchisee is getting stroppy and it's all about me. Look, remember we talked about the life cycle stages that you went through, and look, this is where we're at, and it's quite natural. But what we need to do is to move you through to see. So let's have some conversations, and let's try and see if we, what do we need to do? Do we need to have a gripe session so that we can, sort of get your feelings really out there? Do we need to reiterate the value that we provide as a franchisor? But just that openness, I think, can always help move through those stages. And I think most franchisees want to be successful. but they don't like being told what to do.
Yeah.
So it's so it becomes a really subtle game, if you like, or it's and they'll learn better from their own peers. So again, knowledge gathering and peer knowledge sharing is again so critical. I mean, if we have a franchise conference, you have a panel of franchisees that will share their success stories. You have franchisee case studies and all sorts. That is far better than standing up there and just talking at them with PowerPoint slides or whatever, saying, well, if you want to be successful, this is what you need to do. Now they'd much rather hear it from their peers. That's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, I think absolutely right. I really like, and I think that this is something that should be a good takeaway from certainly any franchisor listening here, right? Where you said there to explain the life cycle stages. I think that's one of the first times we've talked about that as a thing here on this show, right? We've certainly talked about thinking about exit strategies right at the beginning and talking about that with a prospective franchisee, because that's important, because where you're going is indicative of the journey you're going to take to get there. But I don't think people talk about this enough, this life cycle. I don't think they talk about the fact that you will feel excited, and then there will be a bit of a plateau where you're feeling a little bit knocked and, it's not going quite as well. And then, you will feel like you know it all and, that it's all down to your success. I think it's really refreshing, I think, to hear that, and for franchisors to sort of teach that to their franchisees so that they can expect it. And I think you're right, it helps the support teams, because they can say, look, it's okay you feel like this, because remember, when we were introducing you to this, we said you would, like you say, openness, transparency, so important, because I think that openness and transparency sets expectations correctly, and ultimately, gives a better reputation to franchising. If people can say, look, you are going to go through a period of time where you think, no, you don't need a franchise anymore because you know how to do this. It's natural. But actually, look at it a different way, add that knowledge back in, and the whole thing you're a part of becomes better, more powerful, more stable, and it looks after you when you go through some dips and some changes in that. Really like that. Let's have a quick look. I think we had another comment come in from Joe, so let's have a little look at what we make about this one. Joe's put, interdependent relationship is the tight characterization. The franchisor is the concept creator and manager of brand standards and offerings, with the franchise owner in the role of local market expert and delivery of the brand promise. Yeah, what do you make of that? It's important to define roles, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that interdependence, I mean, one can't survive without the other. So the franchisee really can't survive and wouldn't do as well as an independent operator without the franchisor. And most franchisees that you speak to know that and acknowledge that. So they need the franchisor, but the franchisor equally needs the franchisees to take on that role of local market expert and the deliverer of the brand promise. That's very, very, very well put. And that's absolutely critical.
Yeah, I love that, Joe. Thanks very much for your comment. I really like that. And I think it's important here to recognize something, that what you've just said there, that a franchisor and a franchisee cannot survive without one another, right? Because they're so vital. A franchise business can't grow without franchisees. That's the lifeblood of the business. That's what the business is all about. And a franchisee, well, they could do it, but if they were going to do it, they would have done it anyway. Starting that whole business, it takes time, it takes a lot of failures, it takes a lot of effort. So they are so interdependent, as Joe's rightly put there, so reliant on one another, that I think it's worth reminding both parties as you go along how, look, we need each other here. It's important to reassess and remind each other. I think another thing that's worth talking about when we're talking about this life cycle, which has a lot to do with what we're talking about today, is when you're trying to take someone out of, perhaps the doldrums that they're in, or, you're trying to guide them through one of these life cycle stages. Perhaps sometimes it's a matter of taking them back to what is the reason they got involved in this business in the first place? What was that desire? Where did it come from? It's always the first question I ask any franchisee. Why? What brought you to make this inquiry? Why this type of business, and why franchising as well? What was it? Because often the drivers at the beginning, can still be the drivers if they look back on those. Sometimes they're circumstantial. That's absolutely the case. But do you think there's a value there in reminding a franchisee of that origin story, as it were?
Absolutely. And again, that part of the new franchisee induction process involves creating that business plan, long-term business plan that includes what their long-term goals and aspirations are, what their exit strategy is going to be at the end of their time, all of those factors. But you've then got something that you can refer back to for support, to help them achieve their goals, to help them achieve the success that they said they wanted to, but also to remind them of, well, this is why we're on this journey. Has this dramatically changed? Because if it has, let's revisit the process. But if your goals and aspirations are still the same, well, we're on a pathway, on a journey to get there.
I think that's really interesting as well. When you're looking at, what was the reason originally that you did the business, and has that changed? I think that's really important. I don't think that is looked at enough, as to whether the original reason is not the reason anymore. It's not the driving force anymore, and therefore you need to kind of sort of take it back a step and try and find a new route to the passion and interest that goes hand in hand with being a happy, successful franchisee. Yeah, I love that. I think it's really important. Let's introduce somebody who has joined us. It's Tim. Good to see you, Tim. Tim Morris, one of our lovely supporters, a big franchise expert and advocate here in the UK. And alongside Nikki, they have started a wonderful franchise support system called The Bridge. And there it is, Tim, there it is. And he's put, evening all, I finally made it, better late than never, as they say. Great to be here. Well, it's always great to have you with us, Tim. It's been a really fascinating conversation so far. We are going to be ending a little bit earlier than we normally do. Normally we run to about 6:05. Today we're going to run till about 6 o'clock or thereabouts. So in a couple of minutes we're going to enter the last sort of stage of today's show, which is the fun bit, and we're going to find out a little bit about Jan, and she's going to get a chance to get her own back on me and ask me a question. But look, before we do, perhaps Jan, you'd like to sort of sum up and give us your sort of final thoughts on what we've been talking about today.
Yeah, embed an insatiable appetite for knowledge creation into your system. I suppose that's really what it comes down to. Be continuously looking for opportunities to gather knowledge. I mean, another little strategy that I'll throw in is what I would call knowledge sharing moments. And safety has been doing this for years, and it just sort of occurred to me, well, why shouldn't, it's not just about health and safety. This is it's about so much more. So every time you start a meeting, who's got a knowledge sharing moment that they can share with us? And you start putting people on the spot like that, and they start making sure they've got something to say, and you have a few of your own up your sleeve to to start off with. But it's just embedding it in the culture. Let's start when we have a franchise meeting. Okay, we're going to have a pair up or whatever, knowledge sharing moments. Share some knowledge with your partner. So just keep thinking of ways to do it and bring it to life. And then make sure you go through the rest of the steps in the process of refining it, adding it, and aligning it with what you have already, and then sharing it and protecting it. The gathering is the first, it's the critical part. But if you just gather and lose, it's a waste of time.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And I love that idea, actually, of starting each meeting and throwing in that question every now and again, that who has a knowledge sharing moment to share, and then be quiet. Because it's amazing how powerful silence is in certain situations. But look, love that. Great final thoughts. Fantastic conversation today. So without further ado, we are going to move to the last section of the show. My camera will go off for a little bit because it's now illegal to see me without a hat. So I have to be wearing a hat 24/7 now. And you'll be glad to know I've got a lovely hat back on. Now, of course, this section of the show is brought to you by PJ Murphy & Son, bespoke British hatters. And Paul Murphy has made this beauty for me. And if you'd like a hat, please reach out to Paul. Now, Paul is also a franchisor as well, or works for a franchise company. So it's great to have him with us and supporting us. So this part of the show is where we stop talking about franchising for a little bit and we find out a little bit about our lovely guest. Now it's also the part of the show where our lovely guest can get her own back on me, because I've fired so many questions off at the poor Jan today. She gets to ask me one. But look, let's start off with finding a little bit about you. And it's normally a little bit of fun. So you can pick one of these: a claim to fame, someone famous you've met, or an interesting hobby. Give us one of those.
I think someone interesting I met when I was a rather precocious 13-year-old. And I originally come from the UK. I don't know whether my accent Australians tell me I still sound slightly British, and British tell me I sound Australian. I don't know where I end up. But I was brought up in the UK. And George Best, the Manchester United soccer player, lived around the corner from where we lived. He built what we all referred to as the George Best house. Anyway, as a precocious 13-year-old, I did drag along a friend and go and knock on his door and ask for his autograph, which he gave me. And he said, "Yeah, you got a pen?" And I said, "No." I hadn't thought the next step through. So he had to go in and get a pen and come out. He actually did that. So that was
that's lovely that he did it. Yeah. Have you still got the autograph?
No.
Oh, well, look, you've got the memory of it, and that's the important.
I've got the memory of it. Obviously didn't treasure it as much as I should have done. Yeah, 13.
Maybe not, exactly. Well, look, as promised, you do get a chance. Now, you don't have to do this. You can let me off. But if you wish, now is your chance to ask me any question you so desire.
I'm not letting you off.
Didn't think you would. Go on.
So, no, I want to know what your claim to fame is, because I'm sure there's a story in there somewhere.
That's a good one. I'm trying to think, because someone has asked me this before, so I'm trying to share. I'm trying to share a different one, because I think I shared one about Mastermind last time. I'll tell you what. So I live in Hastings, and when we had some friends over, we went out to a pub, and sitting in the garden was a comedian that I'm a big fan of. Greg Davis was in the garden of this pub, and we were all going, "Oh, let's go over and ask for a selfie. Let's go over." And then we were all trying to be cool about it and not go over there and ask him. And then he went to the bar, and I had to go to the bar as well. So I went to the bar and I stood right next to him. And I was desperate to say something to him, but I was still trying to be cool about it. And then he walked away, and he came back with like his top all wet. And he'd obviously spilt his drinks, and he had bought some Sambuca. And I looked at him, and the only thing I could think of to say to him was you smell like aniseed. And that's all I said. And he just looked back at me in a weird way and walked off. My one moment, I could have said something cool. I didn't. But there you go. I did meet Greg Davis and embarrass myself. So there you go. Brilliant. Well, look, it's been fantastic today. Really enjoyed today's episode. I'd like to start by, of course, thanking our wonderful community, our wonderful audience. You drive these conversations. I said at the beginning, I started with nothing written down. Now look, okay. So you're what adds value here. And I appreciate so much you taking your time to be with us and to share your thoughts on our conversations. So I'd like to say a big thank you. And I'd also like to, of course, say a huge thank you to our lovely guest, Jan. Jan, it was an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
You're welcome. And finally, that leaves me with telling you what's going to happen next week. So next Tuesday, July 22nd, on the Franchise Show, we are going to be talking about FDDs and item 19. We're finally going to be talking about this. So it's going to be a controversial one. So we're going to find out all about, if you're in the UK, we don't have FDDs. Item 19s, but we're going to be talking to the lovely Joe Caruso, and he's going to be enlightening us as to all of the wonderful and not so wonderful things about these documents and whether they're good for franchising or not. So join us next Tuesday, July 22nd, 5:15 GMT, 12:15 EST. And until next time, take very good care. Cheerio.